So thank you all for having me here tonight to talk about lay leadership in the Catholic Church. Very exciting topic. We could not think of a more exciting title. But hopefully at the end of this, you will have some ideas that you can share with all of us. So, for my lone Ohio State fan over here, this past weekend I actually happened to be at the Ohio State game in Columbus. We played Minnesota and we won, and we're undefeated this season, just in case you wanted to know. And so while I was there with some of my friends, the opposing team, so Minnesota, came out and with their mascot. He's kind of cool too. He's Goldie the Gopher. And Minnesota came out and they took a knee on the ground in their side of the end zone. And as any large sporting event has, and there's, some characters, maybe some people who had enjoyed some adult beverages before coming to the football game. So there's a group of guys sitting behind us, and I hear one of them say, "What are they doing? Why are they taking a knee? This isn't Notre Dame." And I thought, "Oh, of course it's not Notre Dame. We're playing Minnesota this week, buddy. Don't you know?" And he said, and his friend was like, "Oh yeah, you mean they're not the Catholic team? Yeah, I don't know why. I guess they pray too." And I thought, really? Are we having this conversation? But I share this picture with you because it really got me thinking about what our understanding of what it means to be a leader in the church is today. So the guys behind me were expecting a priest chaplain to come out and to pray, but only Notre Dame prays because only Notre Dame is Catholic, right? It's kind of a misconception about what it means to be a lay leader in the church. Now, I love college football. That was in my introduction. I love Ohio State, and I've heard some strange things. But I somehow just could not understand where this guy, where was he coming from? So when we think about leadership in the church, we often think about clergy, especially in the Catholic Church. We think about ordained ministry, maybe religious sisters or priests that are in our parishes who do wonderful work, who really our church would not be where they are today without their humble service and witness and how they support us. But I think we need to do some math. So look around the room. I'm not good at guessing how many people are here, but there's a lot of us here, okay? Now I want you to raise your hand if you're Catholic. Okay, so pretty much all of us here, okay. Now, I want you to raise your hand if you're ordained. If you're a priest, I want you to raise your hand if you're consecrated sister or brother, any form, if we have any deacons. Okay, let's count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6, okay? Now, if you are not in that category, raise your hand. Yeah, so the majority, 98% of us, right? Well, think about it. In your parish on Sunday, in any large gathering, guys, as lay people, we really are the majority. And so as much as we acknowledge and support and love the work that our religious and our ordained ministers do for us, we can't depend on them to do it all. That's not fair. They're going to burn out. We have to take an active role. That's why Minnesota's chaplain, the priest who led, or the gentleman who led the prayer, I looked after on the sideline. He's not a cleric, and I actually looked it up online because I wanted to be sure. But he's just a member of their team. And he's somebody who took the initiative and was praying with their team before the game. Now, unfortunately, what we share here is the majority. When we talk about laity in the church, society has not helped us. So when I looked up the definition of the laity, our friends at the New Oxford American Dictionary say that the laity are those people who are distinct from the clergy. Well, yeah, that's true. Father Frank and I are not really the same person, thankfully. And we have different roles. But I think what this definition highlights is it says more about what we are not as a laity than what we are. So yeah, we're not clergy, we're not ordained ministers, but what are we? So who are we? And so when we think about it, when we think about who we are, look around the room here tonight. We're teachers, we're doctors, were engineers. Maybe some of you are football players. Maybe some of you are bankers. Maybe some of you are graphic designers. Maybe some of you are students. We have our friends here at Boston Pizza who are servers. We are all the composition of the laity. Some of us are younger than others. Some of us have a little more wisdom. Some of us might have grown up here, understanding the cultural context of what it means to grow up in a Canadian society. Some of us might still be learning that. Some of us might have come from somewhere else, bringing the gifts and the experiences that we've had in those countries here to understand how we can affect change and give back to the communities in which we serve. So one of the first things I want to touch on tonight is I want to talk a little bit about how each of us has been called. I know it's a big word, maybe a scary word, but each of us has been called by God to our own specific vocation and mission. Now, when we talk about vocation specifically, I work in campus ministry. If you don't know, I think they announced that at Ryserson. Go Rams. And so one of the things that when I say the word vocation, sometimes I see students and they like cringe up and they're like, I don't want to be a priest, I don't want to be a nun, let's not have this conversation. But let's actually talk about what vocation means. You know, Father Chris Lemieux is not going to come up and give a talk on vocations. And so when we think about what it means, what is our vocation? What is our vocation as a lay person? The first thing we need to do is look back and say, how many of you were baptized? I'm going to guess probably a large chunk of you. Probably a lot of you don't remember except for the pictures that maybe were taken that you can see that you don't want your parents to show anymore. And maybe if you think back to the high school religion class where they talked about baptism, maybe in confirmation prep they've talked about this. We talk about how humans are made in the image and likeness of God. Now what does this mean? As baptized individuals made in the image and likeness of God, we have each been given a mission. Each of us specific skills, specific talents, and God gave them to us by the very nature of our baptism to serve His community, to go out and to give and to share and to serve. Remember, we are the vast majority of people here in the pews. So if we are the ones who make up the majority, who have these skills and these talents, we have to use them to affect change. We as lay people see parts of the world or society where the church does not have an official presence, or where the church's presence might be weak. So when we as lay people are present in these places, when we understand our Christian vocation, our faith comes alive, and we the laity, become a living testimony and witness of Christ. So let's consider what vocation means. And I won't go into a long lesson, no worries, but I will look at vocation in a couple ways. The first and most common thing that we think of when we think of vocation is what my students do when they freak out and think I'm going to ask them to go on a come and see. We think vocation, capital V. So we think priesthood, we think religious life, consecrated life, we think single life, we think of married life. That's important, absolutely. And all of you should discern that. All of us should discern that, and very carefully. If we think about people who enter religious formation, they spend 4, 8, 12 years in the seminary in formation. Often we don't discern our relationships as lay people as well as they do. We probably should. So vocation, capital V, more of our state of life. Then we're going to think about vocation, what I call vocation with a small v. So vocation with a small v might be, what is your career? So whether you're an industrial engineer, whether you're a banker, whether you drive the Mississauga Transit, whether you're a football player, maybe you're a professional mascot, whatever it is, it's how you use your skills and the talents that God has given you in a professional capacity. But there's something that people often don't know. So I like to say to people, tell me what your primary vocation is. And I probably could ask a handful of you here, and everybody might give me a different answer. And technically, none of those answers would be wrong. But what I really would love one day is to say to somebody, what is your primary vocation? And I want them to look at me with a big smile on their face. They want to say, my primary vocation is to holiness. Because ultimately, that's what it is. We are all called to be holy men and women, to live saintly lives. And though that might seem far off and crazy, ultimately, that's what we were made for, in the image and likeness of God, to live holy lives. And we might live that as a priest, as a religious sister, as a mother, as a father, as a consecrated lay person, as a banker, as an engineer. But ultimately, we all have the same goal. And our goal is to lead holy lives. Our universal call to holiness, as we explore that and come to mature in our understanding of our faith, is a call to know, to love, and to serve the Lord. To serve the Lord joyfully. If any of you have read Pope Francis' encyclical, or apostolic exhortation, the Evangelii Gaudium, and he's like, we should not look like we just came out of a funeral. Like, we're joyful people. Christians should be happy. But how often do you come out of church and people are more preoccupied about the next thing that they have to do? Look around tonight. There's some pretty happy, smiley people here. I see you. You're all looking at me. We can't see each other, but you're all smiling. How do we share that joy? The call to know, to love, and to serve the Lord is a movement, some might say a movement of the Holy Spirit, that draws us towards a deeper union with God. It's a lifelong journey. And as we feel that growing desire to love God, we can't help but want to love our neighbor. Ultimately, to serve our neighbor. We eventually should come to a place where we understand that our existence, and that there is a reason for our existence and meaning and purpose in our lives. God wants us to know that. God wants good things for us. God gives us the skills to be able to know Him, but also to know others and to share and to love others. As I mentioned, the universal call to holiness is an ongoing conversion. It's not just saying yes once, but it's saying yes time and time again. Not just in a big way, but in a little way, in the small actions of how we choose to use our gifts, our talents, our knowledge, our experiences. The more we can say yes, and the more we can be aware of number 3, the easier vocation with a capital V and vocation with a small v will become. Now, everybody here will have has different skills, different talents. Hopefully, as you were munching on some nibblies, you got to know some of the people around you. You got to know what they do. We all have different skills, talents, jobs. We all have a different relationship status on Facebook. But all of us share in this universal call to holiness. And we must understand that me and my neighbor, you and the person sitting next to you, we all need to work together in order to serve the communities in which we're in. We need to accept this invitation that has been presented to us in baptism, this vocation of service. Now, some of you might be getting towards the end of your plate, listening to some of this. And some of you might be thinking, Oriana, it's easy for you to stand up there and to say this. It's easy for you to serve the church. You chose to actually work for the church. Yeah, maybe it's a little bit easier. Maybe it's easy because I actually have an office next to the church. And some of you might say, but I'm busy. I work a full-time job. I might have kids that I need to take care of. Maybe I have aging parents. Maybe you have more than one job. Maybe you're in school part-time or in school full-time and working part-time. How do I do this? Taking on a leadership role is going to look different for everybody. understanding what our role is in the church, how we as the majority can affect change, there is no one answer. And it would be crazy if I was here to tell you that there was one answer. But what I am here to say is that it's worth investing the time to understand how we can serve. And I love this quote from St. John Paul II, because he's like, it is not permissible for anyone to remain idle. And I just think of him kind of sitting there, almost like, not laughing, like very serious while he's saying that, but almost pleading with us. Come on, guys, like, we have a responsibility. And this is like important. If we leave it to those lovely 6 people who are here, we're gonna burn them out. They can't do everything. We need to be involved with them. So what could being a leader in our church community mean? So for some of you, that might mean being a lector or a minister of hospitality or welcome in your parish. For some of you, it might be volunteering in your parish youth ministry, hanging out with your teens or your middle schoolers. Maybe for some of you, it's not an ongoing commitment. Maybe it's giving your 1 weekend a year to the OCY and to Steubenville and volunteering for the conference. Maybe it's once every couple months and volunteering with Faith Connections and helping out at Theology on Tap. It's gonna look different for everybody. Maybe those of you with a business background who are more financially minded, this would not be me, but maybe for you it's helping your parish finance council or supporting the Archdiocese with a Family of Faith campaign. Maybe if you have a medical background, it might be, as we get into the colder months, I always think of the Out of the Cold programs that exist. Maybe it's helping an Out of the Cold program, or maybe it's even advocating, and going out and talking to the government of Canada and educating people on the ruling on euthanasia. Whatever it is, we need to be out there using what we are good at, what we know, and getting involved and serving in different capacities. I don't know if anybody here likes Starbucks, but I gotta tell you, the fall is like my time. I'm a PSL girl, pumpkin spice latte. So last week when I walked into Starbucks and they had moved to the red cups, I was like, oh my gosh, it's November, we're almost at Christmas. Because we go from like summer, like beachy iced tea to like pumpkin spice latte to like Christmas, right? In like 3 weeks, bam. So I walked into Starbucks and I saw the red cups and I was like, oh, okay. Gotta prepare myself for the next like 6 weeks of chaos. Everybody's gonna rush to the mall, do as much shopping as possible. Maybe one of the things that you guys can do, that we can all do, is that this year for Christmas, we can give something. And we can give something to our parish community or to our diocesan community. Maybe it's an hour of our time. Maybe it's a day of our time. Maybe it's a commitment over the next year to give a little bit over the course of time. But maybe it's a different way that we can look at our New Year's resolutions and we can start 2016 off and say, what can I do? I'm not going to leave it just to those 6 people who are here today. I'm going to take an active role, and I'm going to put my baptismal call to good use. Now, some of you here might also be thinking, Oriana, this is great, and I appreciate some of these ideas, but like, I'm a Catholic rock star. I'm involved in my parish, I'm on the finance council, and I do youth ministry, and I didn't even just go to Steubenville. I've been to Steubenville 5 times in a row. Maybe you're like, what's next? Like, this is great, but what's next? So for you, I have something a little bit different. Think about how you got here tonight, all of you. Just in your mind, think about how you got here. Not like physically, did you take the bus or a car? But like, how did you find out about Faith Connections? Did somebody invite you here tonight? Did you take that risk and maybe sign up for an email list somewhere and we're like, I'm gonna get more spam in my inbox, but maybe it's actually kind of good spam because it's Catholic spam. Think about whatever it is that got you here and recognize that Jesus makes that invitation to each of us. Jesus says, go out and make disciples of all nations. If he's saying go out, how is that an invitation? So I want you guys to think about what I like to call the three musketeers. These are my friends Paul, Barnabas, and Timothy. So we're going to think about the early days of Paul. So just a little bit of scripture, nothing crazy. So Paul used to be Saul. I know that's confusing. Why do we like to give people multiple names? So Paul had a massive conversion story. Basically, like, hated the early church, went out about persecuting them, and then decided, you know, the Lord touched his heart, and he was like, I'm converted, and just went out and started converting people, like, by the masses. Basically, half of the New Testament is like stories of, like, preaching that Paul did to different communities. Okay, so what does Paul do once he has been touched by Jesus? He goes out. What does he do? He starts preaching and he starts talking to people. He's sharing that joy. He is on fire. Paul is engaging other people. Consider who in your life has been like Paul. Who has invited you and encouraged you to get involved? Who invited you here? Who has helped you grow and mature in your faith? And to whom could you be a Paul? Who needs an invitation to be here tonight? So Paul was not alone. He had his trusty sidekick Barnabas, who I like to call, Batman and Robin. And so everybody needs a support network like Barnabas. That person who's going to walk with him faithfully along the road, who's going to be with him in the good times and the not so good times, and maybe when he decides to get swayed and do something probably shouldn't be doing, Barnabas kind of steps in and he's like, hey buddy, straight and narrow is that way. Think about who has been Barnabas in your life. Who has enriched your life? Maybe somebody who taught you a new prayer or showed you what skills you have that you could share with the larger community. Maybe that's a person sitting next to you tonight who came with you because you were afraid to come by yourself. I do that all the time. To whom in your life could you be Barnabas? And last but definitely not least, my buddy Timothy rounds out the nice three musketeers. Now, Timothy was a young leader in the early church, okay? And Paul was a key influencer in Timothy's life. Paul shared the good news with him. Paul helped him get in fire and get excited about what it was that Jesus was saying and what was Jesus doing in his life. We need Timothys. We need to reach out and find Timothys in our world. So who can you invite to the next Theology on Tap? Or to the next Sunday Mass? Or to the next street patrol or out of the cold? Who needs to be followed in that discipleship, in that line of discipleship? Now, God never pressures us. It's always an invitation. And he invites us to be Paul, Barnabas, and Timothy, sometimes at the same time to different people. But it's important that we recognize how these three are present in our lives and where we need to be more. Disciples aren't just those 12 guys at the Last Supper. We're all called to be disciples. Now, just before I end, I want to think back to that football game. And I was looking out on the field, and one of the coaches was leading the team. The guy was leading the team in prayer, and I thought, who in his life was Paul? Who taught him how to pray? Who gave him the courage to be able to go out and pray with that football team? And how many of those guys on the football team maybe are going to go out and teach somebody else how to pray, or invite them back to church? Or maybe even just help them when they make some bad decisions, because, sometimes our quarterbacks don't always make the best decisions. I show you this picture. This is at World Youth Day in Brazil. And I took this picture from the hotel, one of the hotels on the rooftop on Copacabana. This is a Saturday of the vigil. That night, there were 3 million people estimated on the beach. Now, if you know anything about Copacabana, because I'll be honest, I didn't really know this before I went there, Copacabana is like one of the biggest party beaches in the world. So apparently they have a really big party there on New Year's Eve. I was there in the middle of July. It was super hot. And we had a big party, but it was a big Catholic party. And that night on Copacabana, as this whole beach filled up, at about 8 o'clock at night, they started adoration. and you could hear a pin drop. I mean, I know it's sand, so you probably wouldn't hear a drop, but it was silent. Absolutely silent. 3 million people, like, that's a lot of people. We make a lot of noise. It was magical. And the theme for that World Youth Day was go and make disciples of all nations. And I thought, when I took this picture, I stopped and I just kind of looked out and I thought, you know, they tell me that the church is dying. They tell me as a young lay woman, especially, you know, where's the church going? Is it really going to be around like 2-3 generations from now? And I looked out onto this beach and I thought, you know what? If every single person on this beach did one thing, got involved in one small way, where would our church go? Where could we go? Thanks.